without further ado, we have on the line Mr. Terry Mead. Now, we were graced by your presence yesterday. Thank you. Really
Good.
appreciate that. But you've got some fantastic stuff to talk to us today about all things property, credit, and money.
Oh, I am here, but looks like Carl's here as well.
No, that's fine. No, no, it's okay. Crisis averted. Crisis averted. So, um, awesome. So, Terry, talk to me about what you do. I know you've got a huge market share in New Zealand. So, kick off and introduce
We,
yourself, will
we
you?
do, yeah. Hi, for those that don't know me, I'm Terry from Property Credit. We effectively allow owners to access up to 80% of the equity that's in their property during the sale process for any things that they may need along the way. So, most common things that we would fund usually starts with advertising. We pre-approve the owner at that point for 80% of their equity. And then that owner can come back and get funding for a lot of different things along the way. Funny enough, the most common thing that we fund in New Zealand, other than improvements and advertising, is actually removalists. So I believe it must be pretty expensive to move house in New Zealand. So we do fund that quite a lot. So basically, we'll fund anything short of going to the casino and putting it on black. Is usually the thing I say, and that's because we cover so many different realms of the property industry in terms of solving a problem for people that, either equity rich, cash poor, or just don't want to spend their own money.
Everyone's got their money tied up in their asset in their house.
More often than not, correct? So, we're here to solve that problem. So you can use that equity that you've got in your house. You're selling for a reason. Let's help you get to that next step in your life without having to pay any money up front. It all comes out of the settlement at the end of the end of the sale.
I like that. I actually had a guy. Now, have you got anything to share, or do you want to do a
Yeah, I
chit chat?
do. I do have a bit of a presentation. I just want to touch on an opportunity that the New Zealand market's not really utilizing as much as it should, and that's presenting the property for sale and getting that property well presented, because days on market in New Zealand is a little bit higher than it is in Australia.
Yeah.
And usually what happens is that the properties that are presented well are the first to sell. So I'm just going
Let me
to
know
share
if you've got any share screen
Yeah,
issues.
I do. I've got share screen. I'm just going to use that, and then I'm going to move my head out of the way, and then hopefully I can present it, I think, from here.
Wonderful.
Present. There we are. So I'm going to talk a little bit about property improvements, and I guess, and how they make you, how they help you sell a home faster, also sell the home for more money. So how do I click to the next one on this? See, there you go. Technology's got me already.
Oh, it got me before.
Maybe I got to click. No,
It's not moving.
no, it's not moving. That's always fun, isn't it? So what I might
It's
do is keep
always
the
fun.
sides on the left and and then stop actually presenting if I can figure out that part. There we go. All right. So I'm just going to move slide to slide like that, and you just have to look at this preview on the left-hand side, I guess. So for those who don't know, and I'm assuming most people online probably may or may not know where Ipswich is. So Ipswich is in the western suburbs of Brisbane. It's probably a little bit of a lower socioeconomic area than your stuff that's closer to the city. Yeah, and therefore the days on market generally blow out a little bit in this particular area. So just want to share a story here quickly of a property that's sold for it's $285,000 more than what the initial listing price was. And you can see the before and after photos on the left and the right hand side here. So we did the kitchen, which is the bottom photos, and we basically gave the front of the house a bit of a facelift and removed a couple of the ugly trees that were blocking the view of the home, added a balcony, etc. I only spent about $30,000 on this. So not a huge amount, but the first impressions when you drive up to that property on the left versus your first impressions on the right are markedly different. And this property in Australia sold 20 days quicker than what the normal average is for that particular area, but it sold for an extra $285,000. So, key here, I guess, is don't let imagination get in the way of what you could potentially do with the property, because we can fund up to 80% of the equity, right? So $30,000 wasn't a hell of a lot to fund, but the return on that investment, was quite large. Now, that's not normal. That's just a bit of an outlier, but it gives you an idea of the the opportunity and what you could potentially do if you do decide to improve the curb appeal for property. I'm going to show you another one as well. So for those who haven't seen this property, this one was voted Australia's ugliest house, and for good reason. So, first impressions are everything. You want to make sure that the first impression of the property is a good impression. And, what we allow you to do at Property Credit is that you don't actually have to have a agency agreement to go and do improvements to a house. So an owner can go and make improvements to their property, present it for sale, and they have 45 days to choose an agent after that fact. So we don't actually need an agency agreement for this. We can actually help an owner before the fact improve their property, then go and list with an agent and launch it to market, rather than try and launch the property to market while you're doing improvements, or even launching it, then doing the improvements, and then trying to launch again, because you only get one shot at the first impression. So some of the things that we do fund in terms of improvements, it's basically everything's on the table. So as long as the improvement can be done and the property can be sold in a 6-month period, then it will get approved. So no, we can't lift the home, add 4 bedrooms, and build a granny flat at the back. That's going to take too long. So it's usually things that can be done in a timely manner to help that property sell. And that's not just limited to houses. We do also allow apartments to be improved and so forth. So again, here's a couple of before and after photos of an apartment kitchen. So this one was in Melbourne, but we've done quite a few of these in Auckland in particular, because as you all probably know, there's a lot of apartments in Auckland, especially in the CBD. So being able to spend a little bit of money giving that apartment a bit of a facelift before you put it up for sale will really make a difference in terms of how quickly you sell it and how much you get on average, right? Which is what I'm going to touch on next. So spend versus return. So across New Zealand, and as Emily mentioned, we do have quite a large number of agencies and businesses in New Zealand using our product. Is that the average spend on an improvement is it's between $10,000 and $15,000, but I've called it $10,000 here. The average return on a $10,000 to $15,000 spend is $90,000 across New Zealand, or in areas that don't get $90,000, it's about 10% of the value of the home. So it's quite a jump in terms of what you get back. And of course, you spend $10,000 and you have it funded through Property Credit, and you make on average 90. That is well and truly more than going to cover anything that we would charge on that kind of a spend. So, on $10,000, we're about $199 a month on average. So just under $200 a month for a $10,000 spend. That gets added to the total. Then when settlement comes, you pay back all of that. So, if a property takes 3 months to sell, if you spend $10,000 improving the property, you're going to be spending, $10,600 roughly to pay that back, right? And you're making $90,000. Yeah. So I'm just going to talk to you about what is actually the forms of pre-sale improvements, or what gives you the best return on investment. Normally, I would ask everyone to put this in the chat, and hopefully we can actually maybe see in the chat. But if anyone wants to have a guess at what one singular improvement will give you the highest return on investment, I'm happy to look at a couple of chat comments here if we can. If not, I'll share the answer in a moment. Have a think about what would give you the best return on investment. Don't think I'm going to see any messages in chat, maybe with my permissions. So that's okay. So what I will tell you, and we'll flick to the next slide here. The best return on investment for a $10,000 spend, or any kind of spend for improvements to a property, 100% by a mile, it's painting. So painting the property either inside or outside or both actually gives the best return on investment and the quickest movement in terms of days on market. So by far and away, painting's number one. Number two is actually landscaping. So again, with homes rather than units, giving that front yard a bit of a facelift, putting something there that's going to look nice and clean, low maintenance, is going to give you a much better return on investment and help with that curbside appeal, first impression type thing when people either drive past the property or jump online and see your first photo on Trade Me or therefore. Other things that we do, obviously, kitchens, bathrooms, lighting and flooring are also options there in terms of getting the best return, on your investment. So I'm going to talk about maybe just the advertising part here for a second, and just want to make sure that everyone has a pay later option in their back pocket. If it's not property credit and something else, that's that's fine, but you should definitely have a pay later option in your back pocket. So one of the things that pay later allows people to do, it opens the doors for you to get a better advertising package because they don't have to pay up front. What we do at Property Credit is we actually send the owner an invoice, which I will show you in a little bit. And we actually give that owner 3 options to pay their marketing, or if they're doing some improvements, same sort of thing. We give them 3 options. They could choose to pay up front by direct debit. They could choose to pay you by credit card. And generally, the only people who want to do that are people who want rewards points. And they could choose to pay later. The national average in New Zealand is 70% of people are choosing pay later for at least their marketing, if not other things as well. So in terms of, I guess, how you can sell improvements, the conversation that you really have as agents is along the lines of, like, look, if you spend $10,000 to $15,000 on this, on this property, you're going to have a chance to, achieve, on average 10% higher price. But in New Zealand, it's $93,629 is the exact average increase in sale price, and that's based on what it was appraised for before the improvements, and then what did it actually sell for. And the days on market in New Zealand actually comes down by 40 days. So the national average for days on market in New Zealand is sitting at around about 99 days from listing to sale. The properties that we see that come through Property Credit that have a improvement added to them, those days on market are coming down by 40 days, which is huge, right? It's a massive amount to come down. And the great thing is that the owner does not have to pay a single cent until that property settles. So all these improvements are done basically free of charge. We charge a monthly fee. Owner pays that all back when the property settles. And so what does that journey look like? And this is what a property credit journey generally looks like. Is that owner decides to sell. They may choose to do, as I mentioned earlier, some improvements to the property before they engage an agent. But you as agents, generally what you want to do is, you want to get an agency agreement either signed, or you want to be ensuring that you get the listing. If you're going to be recommending some improvements, you don't want that owner going away, doing those improvements, and then they're going to decide to list with someone else. So you want to secure that. Owner goes away and does some of their improvements. Then they may come back and then ask for advertising funds. And this is where either there or at the improvement stage, Property Credit will pre-approve that owner for 80% of their equity. So then the owner's only applying with us once. They're given an amount that they can, potentially access across the sale of the property. And how we measure that is that we look at what you've appraised the property at. We also look at CoreLogic data as well. I'm still going to call it CoreLogic because I can't get the whole Cotality thing, I think, in my head just yet. So CoreLogic, we'll look at that. We'll look at what you've got it on the market for. If there's less than a 20% variance in what they say, because let's face it, not always 100% correct, and what you've got it on, got to list it for, we'll go with your figure more often than not. Hence why we go up to 80% of the equity, because we want a little bit of a buffer zone there in case the property doesn't sell for as much, as much as what they're thinking and as much as what you're thinking. But then they can get more money along the way. So then they can come back and, as I mentioned earlier, removalists. The things like legal fees, could be storage costs as well as a pretty common one. Funny enough, on the South Island, New Zealand, we've actually replaced quite a few septic tanks. So that seems to be a little bit of an issue for those on the South Island. And then once the property gets a contract on it, they can literally use the funds for whatever they want. Right? More often than not, again, it's property-related things. But to give you an idea, Property Credit has funded things like cars, caravans, holidays, jet skis, Christmas presents later in the year. Any of those things can be funded. Again, all throughout the journey, all pre-approved. And the owner pays back at settlement. We don't do any credit checks, and we don't have any age limits. So it's strictly looking at the fact that the owner's got a property for sale. They've got equity in that property. We're here to help them get to that next stage of their journey. And so commonly funded items, I've just mentioned some of the things that we do. One that I haven't touched on yet is deposits on another property. So, subject to sale type clauses, those people who come in that, want to find the next property before they even sell the one they're in, because that's coming more and more common in the New Zealand market. We can actually fund a deposit on the next property, be it 5%, 10%, secure that next home while you still got your property on the market. So at least then that owner feels comfortable that, yep, okay, I've got a deposit down on my next home. Makes them, much more urgent, I guess, to sell the property that they're in, right? Because they've got the monthly fee that's getting tacked onto the total, and they've borrowed money now. So it definitely adds a sense of urgency in terms of selling the home that they're in. All of that is definitely pre-approved as well. Done at the very beginning. So at the very beginning, this is an advertising invoice that we would send. So that owner, if you can see that on the screen, they've got the pay later option, they've got credit card, they've got bank transfer. Regardless of what they choose here, funds go into your account. All that property credit needs is they do need an agency agreement. Once you get to the advertising stage, we need an agency agreement. We need the title. Then we need identification from the owner. So not your AML, because your AML is separate to that. Though we are working, with a couple of different AML companies to be able to accept certain levels of AML. But as a private lender and as a non-bank lender, we still have to do our own AML anyway. So we do have to go and get a copy of the driver's license. And then we ask them for a copy of their bank statement, which then determines how much is owing on the home. That's all the information we need. Nothing goes on that owner's credit record. We then look at obviously assess that, pre-approve. That process generally takes about 3 hours. And then what we do is that we transfer those funds directly into your agency's bank account. So if they choose to pay later, you're getting paid generally same day. Obviously, if they do the application at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, funds are likely to go in next business day. But it's a three business hour basically turnaround once we get all the information that we need. So fairly fast. If they choose to pay by credit card, then what we do there, because credit cards can take a few days to clear, we will actually put the money in your account. And then when the credit card clears, it comes back to property credit. And we're looking to do the same thing with bank transfer. So we'll be an intermediary, basically. Once we see that the funds we've got a receipt, the funds are on their way to our bank account, we can put it directly into your bank account, which we're trialing now with a few businesses in the country, and Hamilton, Tauranga area at the moment. And we will then get that funds into your bank account. So the breakdown generally is 70% are choosing pay later, about 10% choose to pay by credit card. And as I mentioned before, it's all those people who want to use rewards points and that type of stuff, because you're paying interest on that straight away. And then about 20% are choosing to pay upfront with bank transfer. So even those who are asset rich, cash poor, don't have the money, or they do have the money and just don't want to spend it, or they don't want to tell you that they don't have any money and therefore they try and find the money elsewhere, this solves that problem. This allows those owners to go and do this of their own accord, because you can send this off either from the lounge room or have an admin person do it when you get back to your office, and they can go and choose whichever method they want to choose in their own time. If they choose nothing, property credit will send reminders on your behalf. So we do separate ourselves from your agency by saying, yes, we're acting on your behalf, but the loan and everything that is done with property credit. We will communicate with that owner and process everything with them from an advertising standpoint. And then when settlement comes, we also get paid back by the owner. So you don't have to do any work at the settlement stage either. So literally, once you go into our portal, send off a payment request for your advertising, or send off a request for your marketing, your property improvements, if you're doing that before the advertising, then once you send that off, your part's done. Property credit will take over the rest for you and do everything on your behalf right through to settlement. So just want to share a quick story here about a fellow named Ken to finish this part of the presentation, and then I can have a chat to Emily with any questions that she may have. But Ken was a 88-year-old man in Melbourne, and his wife got dementia. So they decided, well, look, we might as well sell the family home. And what we'd like to do before that dementia gets too bad, we'd like to buy a caravan and go and travel the country. Right? Let's see it one last time, at our age. So what we did with that is that we funded Ken in 3 hours, all the money he needed for his caravan, took the stress off the whole home process sale. He went on his holiday and, traveled the country and so forth while his home was still being sold in Melbourne. He was able to do that. Wasn't able to get, obviously, a loan from a bank because he was 88 years old. No bank could give him any money. And this story here is really how property credit started, because we want to help people like Ken who are in a position to do something else. They want to do something else. All their assets are in the family home, and they don't want to wait till their home sells because of, in this case, medical reasons. And so we call ourselves at Property Credit Friends of Ken. So if you ever hear that term from anyone in our staff, that's who we are. We're friends of people that want to do something different with their lives. That they've sold their home, they want to sell for a reason. We're here to help sell that solution rather than just help you sell a home. And so what I'll do now is put up a QR code for this. If anyone wants to scan that, there's my details as well. From that point of view,
book a demo. How cool is that?
And you can book a demo directly with me. It's a 10 to 15-minute demo of how it works and what we can do with you. Now, you don't have to be in office to sign on the property credit. There's no costs. Individual agents can use property credit on their own merits. Have an account. Yep, absolutely. And so you can set up free of charge. There's no contracts. There's no lock-ins. You don't have to send everything or certain amount. You can use property credit as little or as much as you like.
I'll tell you what, Terry, I do have a quick example for you. And I think I brought this up with you yesterday, albeit I probably didn't agree with the seller at the time. But I had a guy who had all but paid off his $1 million property. And he was convinced and really wanted to sell his house, go and live with his parents who were elderly because he didn't need a house at that point, and invest in all of this money in lithium shares.
It's interesting. Yes.
So it came to the point where he thought, oh, yay, I'm going to get some money today. And he hadn't done a couple of key pieces of paperwork for the ATO, which is Inland Revenue Department in New Zealand. I had a little blank there for a second, conversion-wise. And he had to do that piece of paper. So he really was upset and unhappy. And at that point in time, I didn't have a Terry Mead. So I did have, somebody who would do, those renovation costs up to, say, 25 grand, that type of thing. But they were not going to give $800,000 out of the $1 million to go and invest in shares that day so that he could gain those profits, right?
Yep.
I know a few people in the industry, so I covered it, and I got the deal done and got him his $800K that he invested in lithium shares, albeit that I really didn't agree, but it's not my money and therefore not my choice. If I had this type of thing with this capacity at the time, it would have been really simple.
Well, it would have saved you a hell of a lot of time and heartbreak to go around trying to raise that. But for a start, at risk, absolutely.
And phone calls from him being upset. We've all had them.
And also recovering the debt, right? So one of the problems that, in New Zealand, particularly that we saw when we first came into the market, is that a lot of agents were covering the advertising for the seller and saying you can pay us back when the property settles, right? Which is great, but terrible for your cash flow. And I won't mention, which brand, but I walked into a brand who had over $600,000 in outstanding VPA sitting out in the market that they had to go and chase and try and recoup. All right. And, you're not debt collectors, because if you were and you wanted to be debt collectors, you wouldn't be in real estate, you'd be in finance. It's usually a line I use. But it's also horrible for your cash flow to have that out there. And if the property doesn't sell, well, then you're stuck with that. You still got to pay.
That's how you go broke.
Yeah.
I remember our Ray White director in New Zealand when I was 21, 22, and I'm clearly not anymore, changing that at that point, all those years ago, because he said at the time, if we continue down this line, we could go broke. I can't have two, 300, 400, $500,000 outstanding.
Yeah, sitting out in the market. And especially if the property doesn't sell and the percentage of the properties that don't sell in your market might be, 10%, 20%, but you're stuck with that bill. You're still going to pay for Trade
Yep.
Me. You're still going to pay for realestate.co, all your signboards and your photography and everything else that comes in with marketing a property. So, pass that cost and the problem on to us. We'll chase that up for you. If the property does withdraw, right, that's the most common question I get, is that what if the property doesn't sell? Then that's fine. Then whatever funds the owner has borrowed up until that point, they've got to pay us back. All right. Not you. You've got your money. You've been paid for the advertising. You've got what you need to do to go and market that property. We will go and chase that funds up for you. If we have payment plans for owners, we'll get them to refinance with a bank if they have to, if they've taken a large amount, for example, and they can't, work out a payment plan. But we have solutions for those owners to come in and do that if it doesn't sell. So again, you as the agent are not liable for any of that. All right, we've got
Amazing.
to take that away from you.
Thank you, Terry. We appreciate your assistance, your time, and I know that you have a whopping big market share in New Zealand of in excess of like 50%, which is like crazy, unheard of, really. So you must be doing something right for all those people to want to use your services. So thank you so much. And again, marketing team who is listening is going to make sure that all of your details go out to everybody who is either registered and can't be here this afternoon because it's been an all-day event.
Yes.
Or that are here at the time as well. Okay. Thanks, Terry.
No
Appreciate
problems
it.
at all. Thanks for having me, everyone. And sorry, Carl, that I jumped in your spot.
No, you know what happened? I'm going to give you all your laugh of the day, okay? Because those that know me know that I'm exceptionally upfront, and Ken's probably laughing in the background there already, going, I know what she's about to say. So, the reason I disappeared and the reason that I was having tech issues is because I have a 4-year-old who pulled the internet cord out of the wall. So if I hadn't had made Carl co-host, the entire webinar would have stopped, in my